Music Hall. How a city built a theater, and a theater shaped a city. Chapter 1. Make a joyful noise.
Hi there. You know, in the coming few episodes, really short episodes, we're going to take a 400-year trip through the history of the performing arts right here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. You know, when the first colonial settlers arrived here in the early 1600s, except for the sounds of Native Americans, who had been here, by the way, for 12,000 years, it was pretty quiet and kind of scary. There was nothing but the sound of the wind and the waves and wild animals. Along with pistols, swords, fishing gear, only 2 books, and high hopes, the English settlers at Strawberry Bank brought drums and wooden recorders and a few oboes, an early form of oboe. So began the performing arts in Portsmouth. The arrival of the Bay Psalm Book in 1640 gave Portsmouth Puritans something to sing about, although not always in harmony at first. Colonial New Hampshire also rang out with the sea shanties of our founding fishermen, added to the chorus of immigrant families, and a considerable population of African voices, enslaved and free. Although formal theaters were banned in the 1700s thanks to leaders like John Hancock.
No, stop that. Banned.
The Assembly House on Vaughan Street offered dance classes, fancy balls, and music lessons. The city's first amateur theater opened in a warehouse on Bow Street, but closed after one short season. By the late 1700s, Portsmouth residents could enjoy a wide range of traveling performers. But that's a story for another day.
Chapter 2. Lewd Amusements in town.
Hey, welcome back. You know, despite the puritanical ban on theaters, people in the 1700s still wanted to be entertained, and those entertainers usually came from somewhere else. They traveled from town to places like Portsmouth, where they performed in public halls, in taverns, and on the street.
Oh, can we start again?
Exotic animals like this lion were on display outside the local tavern here in the 1700s. And by the way, 2 of our colonial Portsmouth taverns, Studley's and Pitt Tavern, have been preserved at Strawberry Bank Museum. Portsmouth spectators paid to see live elephants, monkeys, a moose, and a learned pig that could read, do math, and predict the future, but not really. Itinerant acts included mechanical robots, wax figures of famous people, even a hot air balloon that rose above Market Square in 1796. All manner of actors, acrobats, and wire walkers came to town. Among them was Richard Potter, a black ventriloquist, now considered America's first traveling magician. These lewd amusements, as they were called, meaning entertainment for us common people, paved the way for the traveling Lyceum lecturers who followed in the 1800s. We'll get to them in our next chapter. And to the Vaudeville acts that followed them into the 20th century. All 3 eras brought all manner of visiting talent to Portsmouth, just as the music hall brings incredible and diverse acts to the Portsmouth stage today.
Chapter 3. Those lively Lyceum lectures.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our lecture for this evening is on the Lyceum movement of the early 1800s.
Boring.
It was a period in our national history full of national unity, an era of good feelings, as you might say, and there was this abundance of lectures, public lectures, healthy lectures for men and for women. The word Lyceum was borrowed from the ancient Greek school system of the philosopher Aristotle. A New England farmer and teacher named JOSIAH HOLBROOK created the American Lyceum Society. Thousands of Lyceum lecture venues popped up in American towns, including Portsmouth, in the early 1800s. Lyceum speakers at first focused on serious and moral topics like zoology, astronomy, horticulture, how blood circulates, or how a printing press works. Portsmouth Lyceum talks were held in two locations. Both began as churches. Both were given Greek-sounding names. The Comanium stood in Vaughan Street, while the Temple stood where the music hall is today. The old church pews were torn out and replaced with stadium seating. The old church altars became stages. Over time, Lyceum events at the Temple were getting more lively. There were boy bands and dancers and scenes from plays performed by actors. The Lyceum was slowly evolving into a theater, but not before some of the nation's most famous speakers took the Portsmouth stage. They included writers like Nathaniel Hawthorne and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Former slave and popular abolitionist Frederick Douglass spoke in Portsmouth twice, as did women's rights activist Susan B. Anthony. And then, on Christmas Eve in 1876, the Temple on Chestnut Street burned to the ground.
Chapter 4. Opening Night, 1878.
Hey, yeah, I'm glad you could make it. You know, it was right on this spot, just about a year earlier, that the temple burned down right here, and now we have this amazing music hall that opened on January 29th, 1878. It was paid for with the funds from the wealthy Pierce family of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I think the show's about to start. The opening was a gala, 3-night affair with a sold-out crowd. Music Hall was the city's first purpose-built theater. The opening night speaker was a prominent banker and lawyer named William Henry Young Hackett.
A community is known,
Mr. Hackett said,
by the character and place of its amusements.
Cast, a popular new comedy, was performed by a troupe of actors imported from Boston. It was a brilliant domestic comedy about people trapped by the society they were born into. Early music hall acts included none other than Buffalo Bill Cody, with horses and gunfights right on stage. And Portsmouth met a 3-foot-tall Charles Sherwood Stratton, better known as General Tom Thumb, now older, wiser, and heavier. An actor named Joseph Jefferson played Rip Van Winkle on the Victorian stage. And Portsmouth's own Henry Clay Barnaby sang as the Sheriff of Nottingham in the comic opera Robin Hood. The most popular entertainment of the era, however, were minstrel shows. And while some of the performers were African Americans, sadly, a majority of them were white musicians and actors who wore blackface makeup. But the times were a-changing for American theaters. In 1898, just 20 years after the Portsmouth Theater opened, a new form of entertainment was being tested on the music hall stage. And a new theater owner was about to shake things up big time.
It's me, Big Frank. Open up.
Chapter 5. Thank Frank Jones.
Testing. Are you? We're broadcasting live today in the alley outside the music hall. People of Portsmouth were thrilled to learn that ale tycoon, the millionaire Frank Jones, had purchased this theater from the Pierce family at the dawn of the 20th century. If you come with me now through the alley and we look over here, you can see through these massive doors that Frank Jones built the addition of the backstage that rises 75 feet into the air. The richest guy in town, Frank Jones owned just about everything, including the Rockingham and the Wentworth hotels, and one of the nation's biggest breweries. Jones remodeled the music hall with a beautifully painted ceiling and an ornate, gold-leafed proscenium stage with decorative opera boxes. The supersized backstage still operates today with ropes and pulleys like a tall ship. This huge and flexible space made the music hall one of the finest venues outside of Boston.
Hello.
It was ideal for attracting big city shows like this 1903 theatrical production of The Wizard of Oz. Following the death of Frank Jones in 1902, a newspaper editor named F.W. Hartford bought the theater. Hartford, who later became the city mayor 7 times, changed the music hall name to the Portsmouth Theater. In 1905, during the famous Treaty of Portsmouth that ended the bloody Russo-Japanese War, Hartford invited foreign correspondents from around the globe to a free vaudeville show at his theater. Popular plays of the era included Uncle Tom's Cabin, sometimes with all-white actors, and the comic opera HMS Pinafore. Band leader John Philip Sousa and writer Mark Twain also took the Portsmouth stage. Local actors performed here too. They included Bo Garland's Dance Orchestra, better known as the Pepper Boys, and a Portsmouth auto supplier billed as King Dynamo, who demonstrated the marvels of electricity which... What? Hey! What? Ouch!
Chapter 6. Cinema meets Vaudeville.
You know, people tend to think that vaudeville disappeared when the talkies and the silent movies came in, but that's not what happened. The two were on the same stage and overlapped for decades. And in Portsmouth, where there were 5 theaters running both, people in town had lots and lots of choices. The music hall, renamed Portsmouth Theater under owner F.W. Hartford, hosted all manner of traveling performers. Magicians like Senior Blitz, live animal acts, a cavalcade of comedians, and strongmen were popular. Clara Clemens, the singing daughter of Mark Twain, also appeared here. Vaudeville acts often alternated between short, silent films. With the opening of the Olympia on Vaughan Street in 1917, the city's first purpose-built cinema, competition really picked up. Then came the brand new Colonial Theater in Market Square. There was also the Scenic Temple and the Arcadia, 5 theaters in all. It was too much of a good thing in a small city like Portsmouth. And by the late 1920s, the aging music hall was mostly closed. The theater was owned entirely by the Hartford family. Following the death of F.W. in 1938, his son Justin took over both the old music hall and his father's thriving newspaper business. Despite a few failed attempts at a revival, by the close of World War II, the music hall was on the auction block. Only one man from nearby Kittery placed a bid, and the once grand theater was sold for $10,000.
Sold!
I took one look at you. Cupid took a good swing, and wham! I heard the birdies sing.
But there was life in the old theater yet. Fully adapted for movies and renamed the Civic, it became part of the E.M. Lowe's cinema chain. Thanks to manager Walter Brooks, the Civic survived for 4 decades, although some of the films were not always top of the line. Then, in the 1980s, with the rise of VCRs, cable TV, and multiplex movie houses, the beloved Civic went back on the auction block.
Chapter 7. Hard Times, Close Calls.
Hey, welcome to the balcony. A future New Hampshire governor courted his wife right here in the balcony. And a future New Hampshire senator, when she was young, used to throw popcorn off the edge.
Why you so-and-so?
By the 1980s, however, the city of Portsmouth was moving into a cultural and economic renaissance with new tourist-friendly festivals, shops, restaurants, and historic sites. A team of private owners bought the music hall with bold plans to revive live performances. After a costly facelift, the music hall reopened in 1985, featuring jazz great Dizzy Gillespie, Ballet New England, rock star Steppenwolf, and a return of the popular play Peter Pan. But the music hall closed again the following year. The bankrupt owners then made plans to convert the theater into condominiums, and the wrecking ball loomed. Okay, I said it loomed, it's a metaphor, but it was a close, very close call this time. Finally, following one more private owner, along came the Friends of the Music Hall. This grassroots, nonprofit group raised funds, purchased the 1878 building, and began a $3.5 million renovation. It was a Herculean task and the first of many. But with private, corporate, membership, and grant funding, plus a talented, hardworking staff, the music hall was alive again. Inspired by the rising economy, the entire Seacoast community got involved, bringing dance, music, film, and theater back to the historic building. And you won't believe what happened next.
Chapter 8. 21st Century Reboot.
Hey, it's been a wild ride. We've gone from the founding of Portsmouth to the building of the music hall in 1878. We're here now. It's the 21st century. A lot of things have changed. A lot of things have stayed the same. But what?
Hi, Dennis. Was shaken.
No, I'm good. I'm just trying to wrap this thing up. What?
Anything I can help with?
No, I don't need any help from a sign. Can we just go inside? Thanks.
Hey, where you going?
Today, just inside these historic doors, visitors discover a ticket to another world. Opened in 2008, the magical Founders Lobby is your first stop to an unforgettable event just up these stairs. A community had come together in the 1980s to save a landmark structure. But by 2003, the nonprofit theater was struggling to make ends meet. Amid changing leadership, a search began for a new director. The choice, Patricia Lynch, arrived from the Midwest with a fresh vision and boundless energy. Portsmouth's oldest theater, Lynch said, could and should become a key economic driver for the Seacoast region. The theater's most successful event at the time, and still hugely popular today, was Telluride by the Sea. The annual 3-day event features previously unreleased movies, hand-picked directly from their premiere at the Telluride Film Festival in Colorado. Lynch then launched Writers on a New England Stage, bringing an astonishing list of top authors to the landmark Portsmouth Theater. And I mean really astonishing. Here are just a few. Despite a nagging recession, the multi-million-dollar renovation, redesign, and expansion of the music hall continued, including a new high-tech chandelier, 700 cubic yards of rock ledge were removed to create the jaw-dropping new lobby. In 2011, the music hall added The Loft, an intimate, contemporary 120-seat venue just around the corner from the 900-seat historic theater. A holiday partnership with the Ogunquit Playhouse lives up to Lynch's plan to stay excellent, take risks, and be generous. Hurtling towards its 150th anniversary, the music hall recently added a stunning vintage neon marquee, a modern pedestrian streetscape, and a 37-foot-tall, 10,000-pound steel arch. The arch, by the way, is a welcoming symbol deeply rooted in the city's history. Today, amid famous ghosts of the past, this beloved stage welcomes performers and visitors from around the world and from just down the street to what has been called the beating cultural heart of the New Hampshire Seacoast. See you at the music hall.